Hello and welcome to a special edition of the County Chronicle webcast series. We do a few webcasts from time to time. I'm David Porter, and I'm here with Major General William Enyart, a former Tuscola resident. And so that's probably the only reason he agreed to talk to us because he is in high demand these days. He's a former congressman, former Adjutant General of the Illinois National Guard, or really, I guess I should say, of the state of Illinois, which means you commanded the Illinois Army and Air National Guard, sent troops wherever they needed to go. But here lately, you've been sort of all over the media. But I do want to back up a little bit that you lived in Tuscola, went to school here in junior high. Your parents later independently returned to Tuscola. Were both living here at the time of their passing. Your grandparents were from this area well, I think on both sides, weren't they? You've got
That's right.
uh, your mother was a Dallas, as was mine, and for full disclosure, they were sisters. But your dad's family was also from this area, so you've got a lot of relatives up in this central Illinois neck of the woods. Um, and so now you were kind of a national figure before. You were a congressman. You were, sort of in the news, but not at the level we've seen lately. Now you've been to really on some major networks. You've given testimony to the Senate. At least one hearing I saw recently, and so what can I want to get into the nature of some of those interviews, but I want to talk just a little bit about the interviews themselves and how that has come about and what is that has meant for you.
Okay. But before I do that, David, I want to add one thing about
Sure.
my family, and that is that my brother returned to Tuscola also. And after he finished his career in the Army and had a couple of different jobs, he returned to Tuscola. Well, actually, Murdoch, that uh,
Right.
that suburb of Tuscola.
Suburban, yeah.
But he returned to Douglas County and worked at Lincoln's Challenge and ran Tool for, oh golly, I don't know, 15 years probably, at least. But
Right.
he was on the Murdoch Fire Department and was commander. I don't remember if it was the American Legion or the VFW, but he was very active in Veterans
Well,
Affairs.
and your brother is why I'm called David and not Dave, because your brother was Dave. So to distinguish me from your brother, uh, in my family anyway, if you said Dave, you're talking about Dave Inyard. If you say David, you're talking about me. But yeah, but he also worked at the radio station here in Tuscola many years ago.
Right.
Um, I think that was probably following his service in Vietnam.
Let me think about that. No, actually, that was
Before?
before he went in
Okay.
the Army. So that was prior to he that was prior to going to Vietnam.
All I know is anytime either one of you came to stay at our house when I was a kid, I had to give up my bed. So, but that's okay. Um, but now you are in big demand. You're talking a little bit to me off the air about your schedule, and it's like, my gosh, I know you're 15 years older than me. You're busier than you probably have ever been.
Well, I'm certainly busier sometimes than I care to be.
Hmm.
It's certainly been a demanding schedule for the last several weeks, and I've had a fairly active media role really since Ukraine started. Uh, the You had previously asked me how I got into this so much of a media role. Um, when Ukraine broke out, when the Ukrainian war broke out, when Russia invaded Ukraine, um, a friend of mine who knows a lot of media folks in St. Louis called a friend of hers and said, "Hey, you guys got local boy here who's kind of an expert on Ukraine. Why don't you call him and ask him what he thinks? And I had served in Ukraine. I'd commanded troops in a NATO exercise in Ukraine, and so they called me up and interviewed me and ran a fairly lengthy piece on a Sunday afternoon, which wound up on the front page of the SIU Alumni Association website. And one of the producers for News Nation is a Saluki, saw it and called me up and said, "Hey, would you be willing to do some work for us?" So that's how it really started, almost well 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
Uh, that I started doing these national level media appearances.
Well, you've had one recently on MSNBC that has garnered how over 1 million views. How many views now? It's
Well, I haven't looked for a while, but the last time I saw it, it was over 1.4 million views.
right. So that's pretty significant. And I saw your testimony to the Senate, was it the Judiciary Committee or
That's
uh
correct, Senate Judiciary.
and I think it was around 600,000 when I saw it.
Well, you've looked at it since I have. Then the last time I looked at it, it was right at 500, but it could well be 600 by now.
Yeah, it was a lot. So you're getting a little facial recognition out there. And what is uh, I know these things tend to snowball. It's just like you said, you did one, someone else saw it, they said, "Hey, can you do it for us?" And then and so do you see that continuing to where do you see it going?
Well, David, I don't know if it's my 15 minutes of fame or if it will continue. I'm uh, I'm not looking to be a what is it, an internet influencer? Uh,
You don't want to be the
although
poster
I,
child.
what's that?
You don't want to be the poster child for the discussions and a lot of it is now you were elected to Congress as a Democrat, and so a lot of your posts are in contrast to the president, and that's a um, daunting role sometimes to oppose the president.
Well, you know, the I think that this country was founded on dissent and founded on multiple opinions and founded on freedom of expression and founded on freedom of the press. And I certainly intend to exercise those rights. I like to say that when I left Congress, I got my First Amendment rights back. When I was a general, I had to be circumspect sometimes in what I said, and certainly as a congressman, you think about what you say before you say it, and now I can be far more expressive sometimes than I might have been in the past. Now I have the luxury of not particularly well. I'm not running for anything but the county line, as my friends say.
Mm.
So I have the freedom to say pretty much what I really think.
Right, nothing to lose. And I want to talk a little bit more about the free press aspect. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the Illinois National Guard. That's something that you are intimately aware of, having been Adjutant General, and your views on using the National Guard as policing units in American cities. There was just breaking news, I believe, last night that a judge has blocked uh, the use of the National Guard in Illinois for 2 weeks. So I don't know what that means. What happens in 2 weeks? So if you could address that and your views on using the National Guard.
Well, let me explain the legality of the 2 weeks. And it's a 2 week period because that's what's called a temporary restraining order. And a TRO, as it's abbreviated, is only good for 14 days. And you must have a hearing on what's called a preliminary injunction then at the conclusion of that time.
We should mention that you're also a lawyer.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, right. Well, I'm no longer actively
well,
practicing attorney, but
retired lawyer.
I
Yeah.
am, yeah. So so that's why it was issued for 2 weeks, and then she'll take evidence. Uh, the TRO, you don't have a an evidentiary hearing. Instead, uh, generally one side simply files in federal court. It's called a declaration, and in state court it'd be an affidavit. Uh, and forgive me if I get too deep in the weeds here, but it was unusual in that before she granted the TRO, she allowed the government to file counter declarations so that she had the ability to see both sides. And then there'll be evidence presented at the hearing in a couple of weeks. So the as I testified in my Senate hearing about a week and a half ago, the uh, National Guard is a wonderful organization. I love it. I spent uh, close to half my life in that organization, and it was very good to me. The and the folks who serve that organization, the Guard is so tremendously successful because it is a community-based organization. And Tuscola was always a great Guard town. Your father served, your sister served in the Guard, and lots of Tuscolians have served in the National Guard.
I think my brother Matt was in the Guard.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten Matt was in. So so it's been very successful because it is a community-based organization. And what the National Guard does is twofold. Number one, it is, and these are equally important. I just say number one. Number one, we are a reserve either of the Army or of the Air. And so when you join the National Guard, you get two hats. You get a federal hat, and that's in the United States Army Reserve, and you get a state hat, and that's in the Illinois National Guard. So the Army Reserve part of it, the Army National Guard Reserve part of it, is that we serve to defend the nation. And for example, during the Iraq War, at one point, National Guard units comprised more than half of the combat power in Iraq for the Army.
Mm.
And during the entirety of the Afghan war for 20 years, we had soldiers and airmen in combat every single day, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day for 20 years. So we are a vital part of that American Defense Force. The secondary role is as a ready, trained force for the governor. Most of the uses that we do for the governor in Illinois were floods, but in Louisiana or Texas or Florida, it's frequently hurricanes. Here in Illinois, during my tenure as TAG, we had ice storms, we had blizzards, as well as tornadoes and floods, where we called out National Guard troops. And in fact, when the Bulls three-peated in Chicago as a precautionary measure, we had a company of MPs mobilized, and we put them in the armory, in one of the armories up in Chicago, and they were ready in the event things got out of control.
Right.
They spent the night sleeping in the armory, and things didn't get out of control, and they got paid a day's pay and went home.
I'd like to,
So
I'm sorry if I don't want to interrupt your thought.
no,
There's
no,
a question I
I could
had.
ramble on forever, but so we have two very, very important roles. Now, let me tell you what we don't have though. We are not a civilian law enforcement agency or even a civilian law enforcement agency reserve. Our soldiers and airmen are not trained in civilian law enforcement. We're not trained in investigations. We're not trained in traffic stops. We're not trained in following up on leads. So we're not trained in ensuring that a person's constitutional rights are respected if we stop them or arrest them. So we're not trained to do that. There are occasions when the Guard is called up to handle civil disturbances. I cited the example of the Bulls, and
Right.
there have been several other times when that have happened, when that has happened. But
At the request of the governor.
that is at the request of the governor, and it is generally at the request of the local civilian chief executive.
Okay.
So the mayor of Chicago says, well, I need some folks to help me here. I need some folks to help me there. Or, for example, when the NATO conference took place in Chicago in 2012, I was the adjutant general, and we had 4,000 guardsmen from 4 or 5 states there to help secure the NATO conference. It was the largest NATO conference ever held in the world up to that point, and it was the largest national security event ever held outside Washington, D.C. area to that point. So we had 4,000 guardsmen. The Secret Service was in charge. FBI was there. ATF was there. The Coast Guard was patrolling Lake Michigan. I mean, we had just a mass of security for that event because there were so many chief executives of nations, NATO nations there. And the coordination that was required was critical. We met for months ahead of time. We had a plan that was that thick on what we were going to do. And everybody knew everybody else. I met monthly with folks from the Joint Terrorism Task Force, with FBI, Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, all these people. We were all at the table. We were all planning together, which is one of the problems with what's going on in Chicago today. When they called in the Texas Guard and were asserting they're going to put those folks out on the street, they don't know any of these people. There was no coordination. There's no command and control. You have got to have a unified command structure so everybody knows what everybody's role is and everybody knows how to work together. That has not been done in this case, and that is not a good thing.
I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the cost of deployment to the soldier and his family and his employer, because that's something I've heard you talk about before, and I've not heard anyone else talking about it.
Well, David, that's one of the things I talked about in front of the Senate, and I talked about it because I thought it's very important. We've all heard, or most folks have heard, that the cost to deploy 4,000 National Guardsmen for 60 days in Los Angeles was $120 million, give or take a few $1,000,000.
Right.
That's a lot of money, and that money could have been spent on hiring police, training police, and so on, but it wasn't. It was spent on putting the Guard in there for 60 days. Now, what hasn't been talked about and what wasn't discussed, the cost to the individual guardsman. All right. So a typical guardsman, let's say a PFC, private first class, makes about $91 a day when he's on duty. All right. That's about $11 an hour for an 8-hour day. Now, of course, these folks generally wind up spending a whole lot more time than 8 hours on duty, but let's say it's $11 an hour. A kid flipping burgers in Illinois makes $15 an hour.
Right.
So you've got missing wages. You've got lost wages there. And I cite a low-ranking PFC, but it would apply if you were a staff sergeant or a lieutenant. They make about $131 a day. So you're still talking less than what a kid who's flipping burgers at a hamburger joint makes. Now, so you've got those missing wages. Then you have got the cost to the family. That father, brother, son isn't there in the family unit, not there to celebrate anniversaries, celebrate birthdays, go to that football game on Friday night or that soccer game on Saturday afternoon. That is a cost to the family in terms of that loss of emotional support as well as financial support. Now, you also have the cost to the National Guardsman's employer.
Right.
The employer is required, when a guardsman is mobilized, to give them their job back. They have to they have to hold their job for them. Whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year, they've got to hold that job. What does that mean for the employer? Either the employer has to pay other workers overtime or has to maybe bring in somebody for that period of time to cover that employee's position, or they divvy up the workload, or the work doesn't get done. But at any rate, that is a cost to the employer. Okay. Then a lot of young National Guardsmen are students. That's because of the great GI Bill benefits Guardsmen get, and because of the fact that the state of Illinois gives a tuition waiver to any state school for any program to both veterans and to National Guardsmen. So a lot of those young folks are in school. Well, if they miss a day or two or a couple, that's one thing. They can make that up. But if they're deployed for 30 days or 60 days, like the president is talking about, 60-day deployment, you don't just miss 2 months. That's an entire semester. And in fact, depending on the timing, it could be actually 2 semesters. So you could lose half a year or a year of schooling and have to start that all over again. So that's another cost to the guardsmen. Now, what about the cost to the guard itself? I think probably everybody has seen those video clips of the guardsmen in Washington, D.C., standing in front of the Washington Monument, having their picture taken, or picking up trash, or shoveling compost in the flower beds. What do you think the family thinks about that when they're missing their soldier? What do you think the employer thinks about that? Here he is having to pay somebody else to do that soldier's work, and that soldier is picking up cigarette butts. That is not good for either recruiting or retention. And what about the soldier? Hey, you know what? These kids, they always loved it. I never met a soldier yet or an airman yet who didn't want to do flood duty. Why? Because they knew they were helping their neighbors, their community, their friends, their family. They knew that they were doing the job they signed up for. And whether they missed school or missed work, they were there to help the community. Uh, they're not there to pick up cigarette butts in Washington, D.C. because the president wants to have the drama of the video cameras rolling of troops rolling into town. So there are some very real costs to recruiting, to retention. Are you going to want to sign up again? You're going to sign up for another hitch if you spent a bunch of time picking up cigarette butts somewhere? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I do. Of the guardsmen that I know quite a few guardsmen. I've never heard them complain about having to do their weekends and their training. I've never heard them complain about even having to deploy overseas during the Iraq war. Uh, it was a source of pride for them. I've never heard them complain about having to pull flood duty or tornado duty or anything like that. A real sense of pride of that service. And so do you think that this then impacts that pride that they have in the job that they're doing?
Well, I certainly think it has the potential to, David. Um, you sign up to protect the community, to aid and assist the community. You sign up to defend this country. Uh, you don't sign up to be a cop. If you wanted to be a cop, you could probably go become a police officer. The police uh, departments are looking for veterans all over the place. So I think it certainly has the potential to adversely impact uh, the Guard in terms of recruiting and retention and morale. Um, soldiers, soldiers trust their fellow soldiers, and they trust their leadership, and that they trust the leadership of this country to use them in a manner that is appropriate, in a manner that either defends this nation or helps recover from disasters. Um, if you breach those bonds of trust, if you send those soldiers to do a mission that is not their mission, that they're not trained for, and that they are not needed for, then that is a breach of that trust. And I think that has an adverse impact on the soldiers and airmen.
I'd like to touch on the concept or fact, really, when you're sending guard troops into American cities, and we've heard stories about American citizens being zip tied or retained, children being taken and zip tied, people getting shot at with rubber bullets or getting gassed, including media, including ministers. Um you're now pitting American soldiers against American citizens at times. What's your take on that?
I think that it is a misuse of the National Guard. I think that the current president is uh, driving wedges between the people of this country. He is encouraging division. He, he at Charlie Kirk's funeral, the widow said she was willing to forgive the man who killed her husband.
Right.
President Trump, on the other hand, said he hated his enemies, and he's called for the arrest of Governor Pritzker. He's called for the arrest of Mayor Johnson. Why? Not because they've done anything wrong, but because they have dared to stand up to him and dared to disagree with him and dared to point to the facts on the ground. So I you know, and I'm of a generation, and you may be too, but I was in the military when Kent State happened,
Right.
when Ohio National Guardsmen shot and killed students at Kent State during the Vietnam War in a war protest, and that was a stain on the reputation of the Guard for a generation. And it took us a long time to get over that. It took a long time for young people that we tried to recruit who didn't no longer remembered that. We're one trigger pull away from that happening again. Uh, the uh, the ICE has killed one person already in Chicago. Another person has been wounded. Irrespective of what are the facts there, the fact is that someone's been killed and someone's been wounded. Um, the guardsmen are trained as soldiers. We're trained to respond as soldiers. We're not trained to respond as law enforcement officers. And we're not trained to de-escalate situations. Uh, this is an incredibly dangerous move to put trained soldiers into a complex situation. And the federal district court judge in Chicago has already ruled. One of them has already ruled that ICE is acting in an unconstitutional manner, that they are engaging in violent, unprovoked behavior against citizens. Uh, this type of action really concerns me, particularly, when you saw the video of the ICE agents marching down Michigan Avenue. Well, first of all, where are the very dangerous criminals or the very dangerous immigrants on Michigan Avenue? The only person you might find on Michigan Avenue might be a maid at the Intercontinental Hotel.
Right.
Yeah, so this is just purely showmanship. It is not serious law enforcement. In fact, I was talking to a very senior Illinois State Police official night before last, and that official told me these ICE agents are not law enforcement. They are, and I'm directly quoting, they are cowboys. Uh, so you don't send cowboys in to do serious law enforcement.
And you have made the comment a couple of times on how the guard is trained to break things and kill people.
Yeah,
Uh,
and interestingly enough, that's Pete Hegseth has quoted me on that, or he said the same thing.
Said the same. Yeah. Well, that brings me to another question I wanted to ask is, have you gotten any pushback from the administration? Do you feel like your name has gone on the list somewhere of enemies? Uh,
Well, I joke about that all
that-
the time, and my wife hates it when I joke about that. But no, I have yet to receive that. I have received hate emails, and I've received hate comments on some of the YouTube videos that are up there. The I did an interview yesterday morning for a Washington D.C. Outlet that News Nation runs, and there it was interesting because the comments on that were 80-20 antagonistic towards me. Uh, on the other hand, the comments, as you may have noted, the comments on the YouTube video of my Senate testimony were 99-1 positive. Um, but I get some, I mean, I get attacked like anybody in public life gets attacked.
Well, one of your uh, maybe one of the reasons why your MSNBC interview or one of your MSNBC interviews has gotten as many views as it has is that you made some Hitler references to this administration and their actions. But it seemed like a lot of the comments I've read on that video were all very positive toward you. I was just wondering if you'd had any pushback on that.
None really, other than some comments on Facebook. But I've not had the FBI knock on my door yet. Yeah,
So,
but frankly, I understand that when you take a stand against this administration, then you can anticipate that there will be retaliation. Look at what they're doing to James Comey, or look at what they're doing to John Bolton. I mean, my God, John Bolton, I can't, John Bolton is one of the most conservative, one of the most hard right public figures there is. I mean, George W. Bush could not get him confirmed to be ambassador to the United Nations. The United States Senate would not confirm John Bolton because he was too right wing, viewed as too hard edged, and Trump was after him because he's a socialist Democrat. You
well,
know,
now they've indicted the New York Attorney General on
right?
a real estate deal. And I looked at that and I thought, she bought a second home in, I believe, in New Jersey, and to use as a second home, and at some point decided to rent it out. Maybe she wasn't using it. Maybe her circumstances changed, and the allegation is you got favorable interest rates because it was going to be used as a second home and not an investment property, and so therefore you lied that you're not using it as an investment property. And I don't know the circumstances. I can certainly understand that, when I bought my one of the houses I have owned, I lived in it for a while and later moved out and rented it to someone. Wasn't my intent when I bought it to rent it, but my circumstances changed, and so I changed my what I was doing with that house. How do you feel about these retaliatory or at least alleged to be retaliatory types of legal pursuits? I mean, you've been a lawyer. Your wife is a retired judge. From a legal standpoint, how do you view those types of actions?
Well, when you look at the fact that the Trump's own appointed U.S. attorneys refused to take take the case to a grand jury to try to get an indictment, saying it was too weak a case, that
Yeah.
they couldn't make the case. Um, and then Trump fires them and puts in a person who's never tried a criminal case in her life.
Right.
And then you see where not a single of the career prosecutors in those offices would appear in court with her, would sign off on those. I think that's very telling.
So do
Uh,
you think that's why she presented that to the grand jury herself because the others would not join her? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The U.S. attorney, the U.S. attorney, U.S. attorney's kind of like a general. They're not there in the front lines
Right.
and doing the combat. It's the rank and file attorneys, the career prosecutors who do that. Why? Because the U.S. attorney is a political appointee and they are administrators. They run the office. Now, some of them are very highly skilled trial lawyers, and some of them do, in fact, do that. But you don't see somebody who was an insurance lawyer who's never tried a criminal case in her life of any kind. I don't, as far as I know, she's never tried a traffic ticket. You don't see those people in federal court presenting testimony to a grand, presenting evidence to a grand jury. That's just not done.
To play devil's advocate, do you think that perhaps is intended to be a show of how to the judge how important this is to the administration that we sent in the top prosecutor to handle that herself?
The Most federal district judges, the biggest part of their workload really is criminal. And if they've been on the bench for more than 60 days, they know how the system works. And many federal district judges uh, have either been trial lawyers or public defenders or engaged in heavy duty litigation, and they understand how the system works. You don't send in a U.S. attorney to make a statement if that U.S. attorney doesn't know what he or she is doing. And she had been appointed, and if I recall correctly, she had only been in office a few hours, at most a few days. So
Yeah.
she didn't have the experience, the wherewithal, the capacity to go in there and do that. And to walk in there without what we call a second chair, uh, to support her in that, in my opinion, verges on legal malpractice.
I want to talk a little bit about press freedoms and you are now a media figure, but you also have some background in media. You actually, I believe your degree was in journalism, your bachelor's. Is that correct? And
Right. Yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in journalism.
started out as a reporter, and so so what what would you what do you think about the attacks on the media, and not just the verbal attacks of calling the media the enemy of the American people, but now we've seen in Chicago actual physical attacks of trying to keep the media away from doing their job, reporting what's going on.
David, it's simply appalling. It violates a very basic precept, one of the very basic precepts of this nation, and that's freedom of the press. Uh, and I think it's unfortunate, really unfortunate, that too many of the media organizations have caved in to Donald Trump. ABC gave him $16 million
Oh
or
yeah.
something, and these other large organizations because they needed to get approval to do a merger or whatever. And you don't stop a bully by trying to buy him off. That only encourages a bully. The And when you look at the attacks that were waged on every president since I've been around, and I remember the news media from Eisenhower forward, and they all got roasted about something, and many of them disliked the media. Certainly, Richard Nixon did.
Mm.
Uh, and Lyndon Johnson really took a beating from the media, but they didn't try to shut down the media. They didn't launch these ridiculous lawsuits. That what was it? Trump filed a $10 billion lawsuit or something against the New York Times. Now, of course, it was immediately dismissed as
Right.
being a ridiculous lawsuit. But the point is, he got a headline out of it, and he got a little media flash out of it, and so he got what he wanted out of it.
Well, the media was pretty rough on Abraham Lincoln. Uh,
Absolutely, media's been rough on every president.
Right. So, but the founding fathers, I mean, there's a boatload of quotes about the importance of the independence of the press and the necessity for that, and you know, not that I came on here to advocate my opinion, but to me, it's the last. It's the last roadblock, is a one check and balance of government that is not owned by the government. Uh,
Well, that's true. But unfortunately, David, I think one of the large problems we have are these media empires and these media empires that are controlled by oligarchs. The Washington Post isn't an independent newspaper anymore. The Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos owns Amazon and lots of other companies, one of the world's richest men. And, you know, and we see uh, Fox News owned by the Murdoch family. And they have a political agenda. They push that political agenda. And frankly, particularly Fox News, they get sued by Dominion Voting for a whole lot of money and settled for $750 million. Now, they denied any liability. They said they didn't lie about Dominion Voting and their voting machines. But I question why anybody would pay $750 million to someone if they didn't lie about something.
Well,
So, you know, I have real concerns with these huge media empires. But the interesting thing is that so many people today no longer get their views from uh, television or from newspapers. Certainly, I think I'm the only person on the block here in Belleville that still gets 3 print newspapers a day delivered. The but the instead what we see, particularly with the younger generation, are folks getting their news from YouTube or uh, you know pick a particular social media website. That's where they get their news today.
yeah, and if it's not done in 10 or 15 seconds, they move on to something else. It's
Right,
they want
right.
short snippets, and they want it to be funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I read 3 print papers and I read several online publications, and I learned things like John Deere, Illinois Agricultural Implement Manufacturing Company. John Deere, in the last quarter they reported on, lost $500 million, a $500 million, due to, and this is what John Deere said, you're not Bill Enyart, this is John Deere, as reported in the Wall Street Journal, lost a $500 million because of Trump's tariffs.
Hmm.
How many, if you're trying to rebuild American manufacturing, what are you doing here? And what kind of impact is that going to have on farmers? And the farmers in Douglas County, how much money are they losing on soybeans? What's the price of beans today? About half of what it was a year ago or more. And why are the price of beans down? Well, we got a good crop coming on. My next door neighbor's a farmer, and he said, "Oh, we were only one rainfall away from having a bumper crop, but we got a good crop." Well, yeah, the crop's good, but the problem is we don't have a market.
All right,
China was buying 80% of its soybeans from the US. How many
right,
are they buying now?
none.
Zero. Where are they buying them? Brazil. Do you think we're going to get, and why are they doing that? In retaliation for Trump's tariffs.
Right.
So, if you don't, if all you're getting is a little 15-second clip on YouTube about, I don't know, this bunny guy who's going to sing at the
Bad
Super
Bunny,
Bowl.
Bad Bunny.
Yeah, well, I show my age and lack of musical knowledge there, but if you, and I'm sure Fox News didn't say that John Deere lost a $500 million last year, or why they lost $500 million, and I know they haven't said soybean prices are half of what they were a year ago. So
Well, you mentioned Bad Bunny, and it's hard to wrap my head around because uh, there's a lot of discussion on the right about why can't we have an American performer? Why can't we have a Christian performer? And Bad Bunny is both. Bad Bunny is Catholic. He's from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is an American territory. Bad Bunny is a Christian American. So what are you really saying when
He's
you're
brown. He speaks
uh,
Spanish. He sings in Spanish. You know, Absolutely. It drives me crazy. Drives me absolutely crazy. And David, what really troubles me is that you have these people claiming that the United States is a Christian nation.
Mhm.
The Nowhere in the Declaration of Independence, nowhere in the Constitution does it say anything about we are a Christian nation? In fact, it says we shall have that Congress shall make no law
Right.
regarding establishment of a religion. So, and it particularly infuriates me because the oncologist who saved my wife's life, brilliant guy, he's from India. He trained at King's College in London, and he is now a U.S. citizen. Uh, but he's from, I don't know what his religion is. I don't know if he's Hindu or Muslim or Christian. I don't care what religion he is. He is a brilliant oncologist, and he saved my wife's life. So, to these folks who want to banish Muslims, who want to assert this that we are a Christian nation and that anybody who's not Christian doesn't belong here, I'm sorry, but you uh, do not understand what this country is founded upon or what this country stands for.
So when we talk about Christianity, whose Christianity are we talking about? How many different denominations are there just within the Christian umbrella? Uh, and from what see, and we're getting in maybe into some of the tall weeds here, but uh, uh, from my perspective, so much of what I see from the Christian right is not what I call Christian.
Well,
So
I
it's Old Testament and it's
yeah.
vengeance um, and I'll get on my soapbox a little bit because I have over the years developed for myself, and I'm certainly no expert, but what I call the 3F test, which is faith, forgiveness, and free will. And to me, that is Christian. I call myself a New Testament Christian, which is about loving your neighbor and forgiving others and acceptance and tolerance. And so much of what I see runs contrary to that. That so many of the things that they seek to change legislatively has no bearing on their salvation. Uh, and one issue that is very hot right now that comes to my mind is the attack on the transgender community. And uh, I fail to see how, I can understand if you don't agree with uh, someone being transgender, or you don't understand it, or you don't like it, it still doesn't affect your salvation. They're going to have to answer for themselves if that's an issue, but you're not going to have to answer for them. So it's hard for me to wrap my head around why is it so important to shape that. And there seems to be this feeling that it's an affection that spreads, and that children will become trans because trans is accepted. Um, I don't I don't see it. I know there are an awful lot of people who had gay parents who did not turn out gay. You know, that's not how sexuality works. Um,
Yeah. Well, David, you sound like one of those woke people. You sound like one of those woke Christians.
but don't say that; I'll get hate mail. Um, well, it's just there are gay and trans people in my family, and they are human beings like everyone else, and should be treated as such. And that's where I stand on it. So I want to talk a little bit about Ukraine. I certainly have not kept up as much as I probably should, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about where you see that heading, and if there's any end in sight, and how the administration are they going the right direction, wrong direction?
Well, if you could explain to me what direction they're going, I'd be happy to tell you whether they're right or wrong in my opinion. But I think, I think there have been some really serious misjudgments made here. Putin really incredibly misjudged what would happen. And I think that Trump and the shall we say, anti-NATO, anti-Ukraine faction in the Republican Party, and that's not all, but in MAGA world, it seems to have a whole lot of power, have made some real miscalculations. So, Putin gambled that he would be able to take Ukraine within a matter of days. And frankly, I think everybody thought that's exactly what would happen. It really stunned everyone when the Ukrainians stopped them cold and then threw them back. For 3.5 years now, Putin, who commands brutally a nation 3 times the size of Ukraine with an air force, oh my God, I don't know, 40 times the size of Ukraine's, and Ukraine has no navy to speak of, but so he has been unable to conquer a nation a third the size. Now, uh, and so that obviously was unforeseen. But what is also unforeseen is that it forced Europe to consider what was happening and to seriously begin to rearm. And so what we are seeing now is another world power center developing. We're going to see, and we've already begun seeing, Europe uh, uh, standing far more independently of the United States. The United States is we always get to command NATO because we're the big dog on the block, and uh, Europe, the NATO nations, followed our lead. They fought with us in Afghanistan. They fought with us in Ukraine. The Poles had a brigade with us. Uh, they they have done virtually everything that we asked. Now, but because of what Trump has said and about NATO and about European nations, they have decided, rightfully so, that the U.S. is no longer a reliable ally. And as a result, they are rapidly expanding their military capabilities. So, 10 years ago, we had a now, let's go back to the Cold War. Go back to the Cold War, you had a bipolar world. You had the U.S. and you had the Soviet Union, and then you had the non-aligned countries that nobody really cared about. Soviet Union collapses, and then you have a unipolar world that is the U.S. was the sole power. Well, now what we have seen developing, of course, is you get the rise of China with a very impressive military. You have Russia, which we thought had a very powerful military, but it turns out maybe it was a bit of bit of a lame dog, uh, and really can't get the job done. But now you see Europe rearming, and so you've got not a bipolar world, not a tripolar world. What is it, a quadrilennial? I don't know what the proper term would be, but you have 4 power centers now, and so that is of real concern. I don't think that Trump was urging NATO nations to increase their spending power, but I don't think he realized or understood what he was unleashing there. Uh, we fought 2 world wars against Germany in the 20th century. Do you really want the Germans to become become the most powerful country in Europe again? Um, maybe not. Maybe that's not a great idea. But it's certainly where we're headed. And Putin, as a Russian, has to have a tremendous fear of a resurgent Germany. And of course, the Poles are sitting there between Germany and Russia, and what do they do? Well, they're with the Germans now because they've lived under the boots of Russia for decades. So it's getting to be a more complex world, and the more complex the world is, the more dangerous it is.
Should Ukraine join NATO?
You know, um, I uh, I think um, I think the answer to that is probably yes. Um, but I can argue it either way, David.
Sure.
Um, I think what Ukraine needs is the support of NATO to defeat the Russians. And the uh, the Russians, uh, let's not say the Russians. Let's say I don't want to lump all Russians in this category because there are certainly a lot of Russians who don't agree with Putin, but they're afraid to speak. The Ukrainians need to defeat Putin and his cabal, if you will. And it's clear that the Ukrainians want to be independent, that they have earned the right to be independent. And so I think they need an alliance with NATO, maybe not being a member of NATO, but certainly supported by NATO in their efforts to freedom. Um, the and certainly what I would like to see would be uh, Putin out of office and the folks who are aligned with Putin, the ultranationalists, out of office, and Russia grow into some kind of at least semi-democratic state, which is where it was headed until Putin seized control.
How about American military attacks on Venezuelan boats?
Well, I think it's uh, clearly illegal. The um, the rationale that Trump uses is that they are narco terrorists and they need to be killed because of that. These boats need to be blown up. And frankly, I wouldn't want to be the sailor or the Air Force pilot or whoever's pulling the trigger, blowing those boats out of the water, because I think it's a criminal act in doing that. The We have a Coast Guard, and that's what the Coast Guard does. The Coast Guard stops these boats and then determines whether or not they're carrying narcotics, and if so, the narcotics are impounded and the crew is arrested and the boats seized. We do not, and don't any of the MAGA listeners here go ballistic and say, "Wow, the general supports drugs." I don't support drugs. That's ridiculous. Of course, it's ridiculous. But we do not have a death penalty for drug dealers in this country. Period. We don't have a death penalty for drug dealers. So if it is a civilian matter, um, how can we kill drug dealers on the open sea when we don't have a death penalty for them here? All right. And if they were seized by the Coast Guard can't line them up and shoot them off the deck.
Right.
All right. Because there's no due process. And the number I heard the other day, and I'm not going to vouch for the number, but the number I heard the other day is that when the Coast Guard stops these boats out on the open sea, at least a fifth of them have zero narcotics on them.
Right.
So that means that every fifth boat that Trump blows out of the water or some pilot blows out of the water, completely innocent civilians, or at least innocent to the point where they don't have any drugs on them, which destroys his rationale for doing it. Now, if in fact it is an act of war, then where is the authorization for use of military force? Where has Congress said you can do this? The President of the United States cannot go out and kill people just because he wants to. These people are, while they may be carrying drugs, they don't have a gun pointed at New York City. They don't have a missile pointed at Miami. They do not have the capability of launching an attack on this country. So, and they were clearly, the military has a right of self-defense. There was no threat. There was no military threat to any U.S. forces uh, carried by any of these boats. So, you know, I, uh, I think that Trump is manufacturing a crisis there because he needs a crisis. You know, Trump is. And I want to give Donald Trump his due. He is the greatest media manipulator that I've ever seen in my life. He knows how to he knows how to grab the media's attention and thereby grab the public's attention. That's the National Guard. What is they're not cops.
Right.
They're on parade for Donald Trump. Now, what is blowing these ships out of the water? It is media manipulation so that Donald Trump doesn't have to face the questions about Jeffrey Epstein. He doesn't have to face the questions about what the tariffs are doing to the American economy. Remember John Deere? Remember soybeans? He doesn't have to face questions about what's happening with the labor market. He doesn't have to face questions about the government shutdown. Every minute that we spend talking about ships getting blown up in the Caribbean or National Guard in Chicago, that's a minute that Donald Trump doesn't have to explain the failures that his administration is perpetrating upon the American public.
You mentioned you think that the Venezuelan boats are that it's a criminal act. Are the American military that does drop the bomb or pull the trigger, so to speak, are they personally liable for those if those are deemed to be war crimes or political or illegal acts? Are they liable for that personally?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. In my
So if
opinion,
you
yes. The Nuremberg defense uh, does not work. And the Nuremberg defense originated at the end of World War II when the Nazis were being tried in the Nuremberg trials for war crimes. And the soldiers got up and said, "Hey, I was just being a soldier. I was just following orders. That's no defense. If it is an unlawful act and you commit it, you are personally liable." And I think under the terms of the law of war, now, of course, we are not subject to the International Criminal Court because we're not a signatory to it. But Putin has been found guilty of war crimes because of what he's done in Ukraine. And I suspect that and I've actually looked at the jurisdictional aspects of how you bring a case before the International Criminal Court. And I think if Maduro were to, or another Latin American nation were to bring an action in the International Criminal Court, they might well accept it and be a very interesting trial. Um, the and that brings up another interesting point that I just happened to think of, and that's, we were talking about the National Guard and military forces in Chicago. Uh, if you are there as a guardsman on Title 10 orders, that's federal active duty, which is what Trump did in California and Portland, and it is, I would assume, going to try to, it has to do here. Uh, then the Posse Comitatus Act applies to you. The Posse Comitatus Act says active duty federal military forces cannot do civilian law enforcement, absent certain very restrictive conditions, which aren't applicable here. Uh, the individual soldier is personally liable. So, you're PFC Snuffy Smith and you detain somebody on the street and arrest them, and um, you're guilty of violating the Posse Comitatus Act, which is a felony.
So if you are that person, or you're the captain of the ship or the pilot or whatever, you're given that order and you believe that order is illegal, what do you do?
David, that is the $64 question. And why do you suppose Pete Hegseth fired every top JAG? A JAG is military lawyer, Judge Advocate General Corps lawyer. Every top JAG in the three services within weeks of coming into office. Because those JAGs, in all likelihood, would have stood up to him and said, "You can't do this. You don't do this." He fired him. And that is why they have detailed or they want to detail 600 JAGs out of the military and send them over to DHS. They don't want military lawyers. They don't want anybody telling them you can't do this. You shouldn't be doing this. The you know it it is career ending for an active duty military guy to stand up to Donald Trump, but it's probably going to happen at some point. I don't know if you've seen the video of the Oregon Adjutant General testifying before the Oregon State Senate, but it's gone viral on YouTube also. And that general testified that the Oregon National Guard is to protect the people of Oregon. And the, those National Guard forces will protect the people of Oregon. And if ICE agents or any other federal entity is violating the constitutional rights of Oregonians, the Oregon National Guard will protect them. Now, I'm paraphrasing it, but that's essentially what he said. And he's a one-star general. Tags are 2 stars. I would tell you he will never wear a second star
Mhm.
because Donald Trump will block his nomination from ever going to the Senate for confirmation, and the Republican Senate, of course, wouldn't confirm him. But there's a man with a whole lot of courage doing the right thing. You know, we take an oath to defend the Constitution. We don't take an oath to the president. We take an oath that we are required to obey the orders of the president, but we take an oath to the Constitution to uphold the Constitution. When we have a president who is committing unconstitutional acts, which federal court judges have found in Oregon, Illinois, and California, then we have a duty to not follow those orders.
So
Puts people in a terrible bind.
would it be possible to see a guardsman arresting an ICE agent for um, violating someone's civil rights or?
Well, guardsmen don't have police authority.
Mhm.
So it would not be appropriate for a guardsman to do so. But certainly if an ICE agent were beating a demonstrator, an unarmed, pacifist demonstrator, a guardsman certainly would have a duty to stop that from happening.
I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the government shutdown. Again, you're a former U.S. congressman, so you have some experience in that area as well. What do you see happening there, and is this something that the administration really wants, as has been discussed in the news, to further trim the federal government, um, and um, and also, the discussion regarding the Democrats wanting to restore some of the health care benefits, and the Republican argument that the Democrats want free health care for immigrants. Um, and Do you want to address any of that?
Well, David, when I was in Congress, we went through a government shutdown. I'm trying to remember how long it was. It was about a month. And you know, the problem is that uh, neither side is listening to the other. Neither Both sides are using talking points and what we used to call, or what are called, messaging bills, where they'll propose a bill, and it's just to force the other side to take a vote that then they'll be used in a political ad against them. And Trump, of course, one of the reasons there's no trust anywhere, Trump has sequestered funds. He's not spending money that Congress allocated and authorized and required to be spent. He's just saying, no, I'm not going to spend it. And Russell Vought, his director of OMB, uh, who was the head of Project 2025, by the way, is just saying, Congress, we don't care what you say. Even though Congress constitutionally appropriates the money, Congress is in charge of the purse strings. We're not going to spend it. We're not going to do it. And instead, we're going to spend it here. So clear violation of separation of powers. And the Democrats, of course, don't trust the Republicans because even if they reach a deal with the Republicans and Congress does something, there's no guarantee Trump's going to do it. So I don't have a whole lot of hope about this. But the fact is, let's see, what is today? Today's the 11th, 10th.
10th.
10th. Today's the 10th. And so federal paychecks, including military paychecks, are not going to go out on the 15th. That is going to start putting increasing pressure on Congress as well as on the administration to find a way out of this mess. I think it will probably take till close to the end of the month to get there. Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has said, I'm not calling them back in. He doesn't want to call them back in because he knows that the new Arizona Congresswoman who was just elected, Grijalva, will be the 218th signature on the Epstein bill to force the release of the Epstein files, which he doesn't want to see happen. I don't know why. But he is in no hurry to bring the House back in. Um, and of course, the only way that they could get a bill would be if the Senate would just pass what the House sent over to them. And I don't see any indication that that's going to happen.
How do you feel about the Congress not uh, um, basically in a lot of ways, this administration, the executive branch, has uh, sort of supplanted Congress's role as an independent branch of government. As a former congressman and as a U.S. citizen, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's appalling. Our founding fathers, and Republicans used to be constitutionalists,
Hmm.
but all of a sudden they don't seem to care about the Constitution, or at least the ones in Congress don't seem to care much about the Constitution. We have three branches of government. We have separation of powers. This was all hammered out with much thought and much work to protect the rights of the people so that we didn't have a monarchy. I'm beginning to think that some of these people are monarchists. They want to go back to having a king as long as it's their king.
Right.
Now, they wouldn't, and what is astounding to me is that these MAGA Republicans are so intent on giving Donald Trump all this power. Don't they realize that, in a couple of years, there might be a Democratic president? Would they want a Democratic president to have those powers? Which leads me to believe, well, I don't think these people believe there will ever be a Democratic president again. And why don't they believe that? And what are they working toward? Oh, and by the way, you remember we were talking earlier about Dominion voting?
Right.
They were the ones with the voting machines that got the $750 million verdict against Fox News for lying about their voting machines. Dominion voting was just sold to a former Republican elections official.
Hmm. Well, Trump has made comments about staying in office and not having elections, and to me, that's pretty scary stuff. That we have seen when he talks like that, the initial response seems to be, well, that's Trump, that's how he talks. But we also have seen that he pretty much does what he says he's going to do. Uh,
Well, can you imagine what the Republicans would be saying if Joe Biden had said anything like that?
mhm.
Or if Barack Obama, God forbid, a black president, had said anything like that? They'd be out of their minds. And this, you know, Donald Trump values money and he values power. And he does not value, clearly, the concepts of legal boundaries, the concepts of constitutional limits on power. And I I'm very concerned. Very concerned.
What's going to happen in the midterms?
Uh, can I put you on hold for a second? Can you pause it? I
Yeah.
want to take a quick break here. Okay, what do I think is going to happen in the midterms? Um, I think that Donald Trump and his MAGA folks will do everything in their power to uh, ensure that the Republicans do not lose control either of the House or the Senate, whatever that requires, whether it's re-gerrymandering districts in mid-decade, which they've done in Texas and they're doing in Missouri and other states. I think they will uh, try desperately to see that there are not free and fair elections. If and for very good reason. And that reason is that Donald Trump knows that if he loses the House of Representatives, the House will impeach him again.
Right.
And he'll be the only president in history not only to have been impeached twice, but to have been impeached a third time. I don't think the Democrats can take enough Senate seats to convict him, uh, but I think it would be close. And if some of these Republican senators were to grow a spine, it is possible he could be convicted. Remote, but lightning strikes. Um, Now that's assuming there are free and fair elections. The and I think and it's interesting, the public opinion polls, assuming they're at all reliable, are pretty clear that he's at a nadir of popularity. That um, I think that the economy, uh, in all likelihood, and the longer this federal shutdown lasts, the worse it'll be. But the economy is not going to get better. You'll notice that he has now gone from saying, "Well, the economy's terrific, the economy's great," to now saying, "Well, the economy's going to be better next year." The economy's not going to be better next year. Why? Because these tariffs are going to continue to be a drag on the economy. You've seen the retaliation by China, which has cut into our soybeans, our corn sales. Those that's going to ripple through the economy. When you've got major corporations like John Deere losing $500 million in one quarter because of tariffs, the economy can't continue to absorb those kinds of shock.
Right.
Um, the if you look back to what happened in the George Bush administration, 2008, the financial crisis there, I think it's entirely possible. I predicted when Trump was reelected that he would crash the economy within 3 years. I revised that. I don't think it's going to take 3 years to crash the economy. The stock market's doing well, but the labor market's getting worse. Uh, I've given a long-winded explanation as to saying if it's free and fair elections, I think the Democrats could pick up 30 or 40 seats in the House, and maybe two or three in the Senate. If they pick up four in the Senate, which would give them then a 51 vote, and assuming the independents vote with them, and who knows what Fetterman will do, but that would theoretically give them a 51 vote margin, and so Vance could not break a tie. Uh, and I think that um, you would see a lot more legislation that Trump is going to have to ignore, subvert, and disregard. Uh, Sooner or later, some Republicans, senators are going to have to grow a spine.
Who is your who do you see right now as the most likely Democrat to prevail in the primaries for the next presidency? Who's your money on?
Oh, it's way too early. Way too early to even speculate,
Who do you
David.
like? Who do you like? That's um, doesn't have to necessarily be one person, but
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what the ideal candidate would be. I think the ideal candidate, one of the Democrats done very, very well. we did well with Jimmy Carter. We did what the first time. We did well with Bill Clinton. Uh, when we had a moderate Southern uh, uh, Democrat who could appeal to a big tent. Uh, Obama was not a particularly, although he was a moderate, he was not certainly not a Southerner, and was from Illinois. Um, the and so I would like to see either a Southerner or a Midwesterner who is a moderate who can attract a big tent, can fill a big tent, and so you've got some folks who fit that bill. Uh, I wouldn't want to pick one of them today. I think there's going to be ongoing proving of candidates. Um, the but I think that's what we need is a moderate Midwesterner who can or Southerner who can fill that tent
Well, of course, you haven't thrown out any names, but
for good cause.
for from what I see from people who seem to be gaining some traction, of course, you got Governor Pritzker, you've got Gavin Newsom, you've got Shapiro in Pennsylvania, you've got Pete Buttigieg. Um, uh, so I don't know who else is out there, if any of those are potentially viable, or if there's someone else that may be coming up that we need to be looking at that or watching that might be, Obama kind of came out of nowhere. He kind
Yeah,
of gained fame when
he
he gave
did.
a speech at the Democrat National Convention and took off from there.
Yeah.
Um, so so I don't know, but that's I figure you've got a better pulse on that sort of thing than I do.
Well, Obama, just grasped the imagination of the American public. I don't. Uh, I don't see that person today. I think certainly Newsom has had a big podium, although he's kind of yielded that podium now to Pritzker. I think that I think that Pritzker's doing a great job as governor. We have had 7 balanced budgets in a row, something we could never get done under Ronner. The uh, state's bond rating has improved 8 times since he's been in office, which certainly it was the exact opposite under Ronner. And bond ratings are kind of an esoteric thing. People go, "What the hell is he talking about?" But that's really important because the better your bond rating, the lower interest you have to pay to sell your bonds, which means savings for taxpayers. Um, I think he's been a terrific governor. The Whether he'll attain the national stature, that I think that's one of the reasons that Trump is attacking both him and Newsom so much. He sees them as rivals for national stature. There's Andy Beshears in Kentucky, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. Um, you've and there's Tim Walz in Minnesota. And I know Tim personally. I served in Congress with him. He's a great guy. I really, really like him. But I don't see him having that national podium to make the jump. Uh, you had mentioned Pete Buttigieg. Uh, Pete Buttigieg, in my opinion, just doesn't have the high level experience to do it. And I think, frankly, one of the problems that Obama had as president was that he only had 2 years in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate, and he'd been an Illinois state senator prior to that time. He really didn't have the executive experience when he became president. And so he had to learn a lot in order to grow into the job. I think he grew into the job, but I think we need someone who has had experience running a big state and has uh, either and of course Obama I think did well by bringing Biden in because Biden had those decades and decades of experience in the Senate,
Mhm.
which when you look at what Joe Biden got accomplished during his presidency, uh, he was dealing with a very slim majority in the House and in the Senate. And he got incredible things done, the infrastructure bill and lots of other legislation. I think Joe Biden may well be like Harry Truman. When Truman left office, he was uh, disregarded and in disrepute. And 40 years later, Harry Truman was regarded as an incredibly good president for what he got done. And I think the same may happen for Joe Biden 40 years from now, but uh, that remains to be seen.
One last thing that I want to touch on, and before I ask you if there's anything else you want to add, I personally don't pay a lot of attention to the Epstein argument, the discussions in the files. I think it's a little voyeuristic, although I also think it's very serious. But I wanted to circle back. You mentioned the Epstein files earlier to get your comments on how significant that is, how important that is, and what should or should not be happening there.
Well, you know, I remember the saying used to be that it's never the crime, it's always the cover up. It's the cover up that gets you, not the crime. And that we may well see that happening today. Trump and his friends uh, pounded and pounded and pounded that the Democrats are pedophiles and that Epstein was dirty and Clinton was dirty with him, and on and on and on. And so then when Trump gets into office, oops, well, we were mistaken. That didn't really happen at all. And, there's nothing to see there. Let's move along. I think the cover up is the problem. 20 minutes.
You get you
My
getting
my
you
spouse
getting
is
the
getting,
signal? You getting the
what's
signal?
that?
I said, are you getting the signal?
Yeah, I'm getting the hook.
Yeah.
Um, so do I think um, I think that there were clearly crimes committed there. There's no question about that. I haven't read the files. I'm no expert on it. I don't know if Epstein committed suicide or not. Uh, the but I think clearly Pam Bondi's testimony before the Senate the other day was really clear. She did not deny that there were photographs of Donald Trump with underage girls or young girls.
Nude too,
What's that? Nude or
or
semi-nude.
topless. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that she did not deny that, I don't, was it an oversight? Oh, maybe, but she's a smart lawyer and she's really an obnoxious person.
Yeah.
So if she'd been able to deny it, she would have vociferously denied it instead of attacking the senators and trying to skate around the edges.
Well, General, I've kept you a long time. I know you're very busy. I appreciate you taking some time with me today, and I do want to give you the opportunity. If there was anything on your mind that you had hoped I would ask or thought I would ask and didn't ask that you want to comment on.
David, if I could say one thing to your viewers, your listeners, I'm sure that there are things that I said today that will upset people, anger people, uh, cause them to withdraw into their Fox News silo. Fox News is a proven liar. And many of the other right-wing news channels, Newsmax and so on, have been sued and have lost. That was not weaponization. They either settled the cases or were found guilty of defaming. people by a jury of peers, or in the case of Fox News, forked over $750 million because they knew they would lose. That's the only reason you give away that much money. So I would urge people to broaden your horizons. Don't sit there glued. And you know, you can say the same thing for MSNBC, although I appear on it. It has a bent, and you need to understand there is an editorial bent there. So please, you know, I'm not a paid shill of the Democratic Party. I'm never going to run for office again. Uh, but there are people out there who speak the truth. Uh, and uh, the unfortunately, Donald Trump has seized control of this media universe, and people listen to it. Friends, the emperor has no clothes. The emperor has no clothes.
Well, again, thank you, General Enyart, and appreciate your time and I personally have found it to be quite fascinating and so I'll hope to see you soon.
All right, great, David. You have a great time and enjoy the rest of your cigar.
All right, thanks for tuning in.